Thanks, Laura. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Stephen Visser. As Laura mentioned, I'm the practice lead at DevFacto. In my day-to-day life, I talk to quite a few businesses, both the IT departments and the operations side. I talk to people ranging from field staff, administrators, to managers. And in all of these conversations, I find a theme is that people don't often understand what the opportunities are with mobility in the cloud. So today I wanted to talk and sort of get some clarity around some of these opportunities. So last 2 weeks ago, we took this talk on the road to some of our regions, Calgary, Regina, and Edmonton. And we had a breakfast series. So we invited everyone for breakfast and we did this talk. I was hoping that we could somehow find a way to get you guys breakfast this morning as well, but apparently GoToMeeting hasn't added that feature yet. So we'll just get the talk this time. So the first thing that I want to ask is, do you guys think that technology can be a competitive advantage in your business? What about if I make this a little more personal? Is technology today creating a competitive advantage? I want to actually stop for a minute and see what you guys think. Maybe if you have just a few seconds here, let me know. All right, great. So I think for most people who we've talked to have said that technology can be, but it isn't always the competitive advantage that they hope. And really, I mean, that's the goal. We have these computers that are ubiquitous in our lives, and the goal is that it somehow makes our lives easier. And we carry around these supercomputers in our pockets, and we have our information almost anywhere. So hopefully, these technologies can give us a competitive advantage, especially in our business, and that's what I want to convince you of today. But if we take a look at what people's perceptions are of these technologies, it's often either a cost center, it's a liability, it's confusing, it requires a lot of maintenance, it's generally broken, it doesn't work when you need it. That's something that we hear all the time. Sometimes, in some rare cases, the businesses will say, no, technology is totally empowering. I feel like I have a lot of fun when I use technology, and I find it so engaging. When we have those experiences where technology just works and it works well, we can really do some amazing things. And in our businesses, we can outpace our competitors and create a strong competitive advantage. So I have some good news, and that is that your lives are going to get better if you choose to use cloud and mobility together. In 2014, these technologies have really matured and are at a point now where they give us an advantage that we haven't had before. So businesses that I see in my day-to-day life who use these technologies and use them well are excelling, and they're rising above their competitors, and they're doing things far more efficiently. So when they're used together, these technologies offer us unprecedented opportunity. So I want to start by framing this as a discussion about technology that revolutionizes our way of thinking. And that's really important. It's not just a simple incremental improvement over time. That's not what mobility is. Instead, we see today a revolutionary technology. It's a step above. So I'm going to take you through a story of Joe the caveman. So he lived before the wheel had been invented. He lived before the bow and arrow had been invented. Things were tough. He was hungry. The mammoths would scamper by his cave each day, and he would look out at them hungrily. His little hammer that he had wasn't a really effective way of hunting. And so oftentimes for days, weeks, months, he might go hungry. He might not have anything to eat. So one day he walks out of his cave and he sees something that he's never seen before. He doesn't understand what it is. It has a couple of wheels. But he has no idea what that means. They're round, but in no other way does he understand what this is. So he pokes around, he sort of hits it with rocks and pulls at it to figure out what it is this thing is. And eventually he realizes, I know exactly what this is. There's two things, in fact, that I recognize, and that's the handlebars and the seat post. So he pulls them off and realizes these are exactly like the hammer that I had, maybe just slightly better. They're metal and they're hard, so maybe they'll help me hunt the mammoths. So he runs away chasing the mammoths the next day, and the bike just rusts and goes completely to waste. Limitless potential is being wasted. So what if Joe had taken the time to learn how to ride this bicycle? We all can remember those times where we started to learn how to ride, or our kids, and it's a painful process. It takes a lot of imagination, persistence, and there's some bruises along the way. So if Joe would have taken the time, though, to understand this bicycle, it would have changed his life. He probably would have been able to move over larger territories to find new game. He would have been able to catch things that were faster. For example, some nice fat flamingos that he saw just outside his cave. So if he would have taken the time to really understand what this technology is, he would have had a dramatically different result. So, and that's the point here when we talk about mobility in the cloud. We need to seek to understand revolutionary technology for what it is, not for what we understand it to be based on our past frame of reference. And only by understanding this will we be able to use technology to its fullest potential. So when we at DevFacto take a look at mobile and the cloud, and when we talk to our clients, we ask, how are you open to understanding the new potential that we see in this technology? And that's a really important factor. An example is, we talked recently to a business about doing vehicle inspections. So they do this every single day. Several crews, maybe even a dozen crews do this every single day, and it's a tedious paper-based process for them. So sometimes it takes as long as 15 minutes to fill out all the paperwork. So we imagined with this company how we could re-implement these forms in a mobile app. And it became apparent there was a lot of advantages that we could gain from using the mobile platform, but thinking differently. So we imagined a case where there's a QR code on the door of the vehicle. You walk up with your smart device, you scan that QR code, and it pulls up all the vehicle information. You don't have to enter that every time by pen. And the mobile device also pulls down the GPS location of where you are, so you don't have to enter your location. All of that is automatically filled out, and that's probably at least half of the form. So next thing is these field workers, they walk around the vehicle. There's QR codes on the bumper, on the passenger side door, on the rear bumper, and the inspector basically walks around the vehicle, and this, from the business perspective, ensures that the entire vehicle is being inspected every time. There's a lot more consistency and enforcement of proper inspections. If there is any defects anywhere on the truck, all they do is snap a photo of it, and up comes they can choose the type of issue that has been that they've seen, and press send, submit, and that immediately goes to head office. And head office can do some interesting things, like immediately schedule that vehicle for maintenance, for example. So by rethinking the way that the process works, by rethinking what a form can be, we're not just simply entering information, we're actually trying to give the user the optimal experience to make the most of their mobile device. If we think that way in our businesses, we're going to see a lot of interesting things. So I've alluded to these two words, mobility and the cloud. I want to take a closer look at what these are, because I've used a lot of powerful words. Revolutionary, paradigm shift, game-changing. There's a lot of strong words, and if you read about this stuff online, you'll see these words used as well. But I want to substantiate my claims here and take a look at what they mean. The first thing to note is that these words are not really new at all. In fact, Salesforce was around in 1999 and was really maybe the first commercially successful cloud platform. Mobility has been around for a long time. If you look at Palm or BlackBerry, that was well before 2007. But the iPhone came out in 2007 and became a household name, mobility and these smart devices. And it was really kind of an inflection point in the uptake of these. So it's not new, but it's different today. In fact, if we look back over time to see how these two technologies have matured over time, we see a similar trajectory. They've both started around the year 2000 and slowly matured as platforms. So the smartphone became a tablet, even today we're starting to see things like a watch. In Salesforce happened in 1999, then Amazon created their cloud platform, which is probably the most popular out there today. Google created theirs, Microsoft created Azure, Facebook bought Parse. So all of these things improved the experience on both these platforms and gave more power to each of these technologies. And that's a really interesting thing. It's because they're maturing at a very similar rate, and they're both becoming very, very mature for businesses and very, very powerful. So today, in 2014, we're in kind of a perfect storm of technology, which will have a far-reaching impact in the enterprise. Satya Nadella says, the CEO of Microsoft, says that we live in a mobile-first and cloud-first world. And if we look at all the businesses out there, the big businesses, IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apple, they all have a very strong focus on the cloud and on mobile devices. In fact, most Canadians today have smartphones. Microsoft Azure is a relatively newcomer, but it has thousands of businesses subscribed to their service. We see the world around us becoming more and more oriented towards mobility and towards the cloud. So when I use the word mobile first, what do I mean? I mean making mobile access a priority, that the people in your business who have smartphones, almost certainly, it means giving them access and making them, enabling them to be a part of your organization from wherever they are. And it means thinking about it differently, because when you design for mobility, you're actually designing in a slightly different way. You're building the interfaces, not just a smaller version of what you had in PCs, but actually different and optimized and improved. When we're talking about infrastructure, we have to look at that in a different way. We're talking about different considerations like offline mode. And communication's a really big part of mobility. It's what makes us all love our smartphones, because when we don't have it, we can't communicate to the people around us, whether it's just text messages or keeping up with Facebook or writing emails. All of that stuff keeps us connected to our world, and our mobile devices are part of that. So it means actually when we build software for the mobile platform and we're putting mobile first, it means thinking about how we can facilitate communication. When we're talking about cloud first, it's something that businesses have actually maybe gradually been adopting. It's an architectural decision. And we talk about API a lot when we talk about cloud. And what I mean by that is it stands for application programming interfaces. It's sort of the interface of the cloud. It's what developers will look at when they're creating these services. So when we're talking about cloud first, we're talking about making data as accessible as possible. So that means we're looking at things as a service. So if you have a human resources department, you're looking at how can we access HR resources as a service? How can we access asset management as a service? How can we access financial system as a service, or any other line of business? It's about thinking about how we can have access to data from wherever we are. We also look at it from a different security standpoint. There's some new implications that make it easier to access, but is maybe a little bit alien to most businesses. A really important third point here is about push notifications. If you use a mobile device, you know that the mobile device is not something you interact with in order to send things. It's actually something that gives you events that you can respond to. And that's what the cloud can do is when the cloud, when your organization decides that something that you need to know about something, you can actually push that information to you. And that's what we mean by push notifications. And it's making our infrastructure much more accessible and a more engaged part of our lives. And then also abstractions. We need to be okay with letting go of the control that we've had historically in our infrastructure. We don't have to worry about power and cooling and security and all this stuff to the same degree that we used to, simply because the cloud offers a lot of these as abstractions. So I want to dig deep into some of the themes that make mobility quite interesting. The first is the sheer number of devices that are being sold today. It's really actually quite unprecedented. Tablets are growing faster than PCs ever have. They outsold PCs by 50% last year. 70% of Canadians have smartphones, and this number increases at a staggering rate. Last year, we had far, far fewer of these. Smartphones really were considered just toys only 5 years ago. If we look at the number of, if we look at the computing power of these devices that fit in our pockets, it's amazing. The iPad Air Air 2 that was announced yesterday from Apple actually has 3 billion transistors. I put 2 billion on this slide, but it just shows the sheer number of computing resources that we have in our pockets. We also have much more beautiful devices than ever before. So the new Samsung Galaxy Note, for example, has more pixels than even the most advanced console like the Xbox or the PlayStation. Graphics are very important, and it's actually quite incredible that we can fit the type of graphics that we can into our pockets. There's a lot of new opportunities in these devices as well. There's new sensors that you can use gyroscope or accelerometer information. You can use GPS or Bluetooth to position yourself in space. The Samsung Galaxy S5, for example, has 10 different sensors. And that is quite interesting because businesses can come up with some interesting use cases. So there's two themes that come out of these advances. The first is that we can use devices anywhere, anytime. And that seems fairly obvious, but it has an important consequence. And that is that we can start to come up with interesting apps. One of the ones that we worked on recently was a company that builds safety applications. So if a worker is out in the field alone and they're in potentially unsafe working environment, like working from heights, maybe they're on top of a ladder, or maybe they're in an area where there may be some sour gas or something. So if you're working alone, you don't have anyone to call home if you're in danger. But that's where this app came in. The worker would actually keep this device in their pocket. It would actually keep them safe without them having to do anything. And it would monitor for activity. So if someone was still for 10 minutes or something, the device would call home, say, Joe is in danger, so go out and rescue him. Or if it encountered any impact, if it encountered a fall, it would also do the same thing. So this wouldn't work quite as well if the worker didn't have this in their pocket all the time. That's one of the things that makes mobile devices so powerful, is we can assume that people won't forget it. If it was something that you would clip onto yourself, almost certainly in the field we would see people forgetting or leaving these things behind. But since these mobile devices are with these people anyways, we can come up with really interesting use cases that make people more safe. Another theme of mobility is that people are more connected and everything feels real time. An example of this is 97% of text messages are read within a few minutes of receiving them. That's something that's new on mobile devices that wasn't present on desktops. So we can take advantage of this. For example, we worked with a school recently that does a lot of distance education. So teachers are responsible for somewhere around 100 students. In a traditional classroom, this was much easier. A teacher would be able to look out at their classroom and say, does anyone have any questions? If the students put up their hands, they could answer the questions, but that doesn't exist when you're doing remote teaching. So what we decided to build was a app that the teacher would have that would connect them to their students. And it had to be an app. It had to be a mobile device, because that's something that a teacher always has. That's something that actually most students have today. And so what happened was, if students have questions, they could immediately forward it to the teacher. The teacher could be highly responsive to these students and their issues. And as a result, there's much more connection, and the teachers were much more coordinated. You can imagine that if the teacher even took half an hour or an hour to respond, if it was something over email, the students wouldn't feel engaged. They wouldn't be able to continue on in their work and would be less successful. If we take a look at the cloud and some of the themes in the cloud, we can also see some significant advantages. The first is that it takes today, for those of you who maintain on-premise infrastructure, servers take a long time to create. They take a long time to purchase. They take a long time to set up. They take a long time to install. All these different steps, sometimes for some businesses, can take months. But when you're using cloud services, Azure in particular, you can do that in less than a minute. And that's really quite incredible. If you have new users and you need to expand some of your resources, you can scale instantly. If you have a new app that you need to deploy, you can do that right away. We've never seen anything like this before. The on-premise infrastructure is always on, or is on most of the time, which means that it burns through energy. It requires constant maintenance because you need to make sure that it's always working. But when you're talking about the cloud, it actually scales based on who's using it. So you can turn it off at 4 o'clock when everybody goes home, and you can turn it back on at 9 when everybody walks in the morning, or it can scale automatically. And that has huge energy savings and helps the bottom line of your business. Another really important thing to keep in mind is that we have some substantial cost savings in the cloud. If we look at this graph, on the left-hand side, you see a scale, and it's actually a logarithmic scale, which means that this curve is actually far more dramatic than we even see here. So in 1990s, we were paying about $520 for a million transistors, basically. Today, it costs 5 cents, and that is huge, a huge savings. So this is for computation power, but the same is true of storage or of bandwidth as well. We're getting economies of scale that dramatically decrease the cost. An example of this is actually in the late 90s when Google was just starting to revolutionize the way that these data storage, these computational, the cloud basically was being created. So Larry Page said, well, why do we have servers that with all of this case, servers are actually quite large in space. And Larry was like, we need to make the footprint of these much smaller so that we can squeeze them into smaller spaces. And so what he did is he actually took each of these servers apart. This is just about the time when Google was getting started, and started to make those components much smaller. And it ended up that he was able to fit 50 times more servers into the same amount of space simply by making it smaller. That was sort of the beginning of all of this, these advances. People said, well, why do we have to make things bigger? Why can't we make them much smaller, more power efficient? And we're getting those benefits today. We're getting incredible cost savings. In fact, it now has a name. It's called Bezos Law. And that the Bezos Law says that server resources will cost 50% less every 3 years. So it halves every 3 years. This is simply impossible to get using on-premise infrastructure, especially if you're not a dedicated IT shop. Your costs will go up over time, in all likelihood, with with the cost of personnel to maintain these and IT experts, security experts. Costs generally go up, but for the cloud, it's dramatically decreasing. Amazon Web Services has a ton of data stored in it. It has now 2 trillion objects. And this is quite remarkable. It speaks to the uptake of these services, these cloud services. One really important theme here is that you have to worry about less things, and who doesn't want to worry about fewer things? So if we look at power or data security replication, if we look at networking or cooling, all of these things are things that we used to have to worry about a lot. In fact, we spend most of our time as IT people worrying about these concerns. Well, we don't anymore when we use cloud services. Something that a lot of businesses are concerned about is security. So when I was creating this slide deck, I went through Microsoft Azure's material to see what they did to make sure that data is secure. And Microsoft Azure is just one of the many services that will have these types of things. Microsoft has dedicated vulnerability research teams. That means they're actively looking for where areas are of insecurity and patching them. They have intrusion detection teams who just sit around making sure that all of the infrastructure is secure. They have 24-hour 7-day-a-week response, which means that if anything happens at any time, someone's there to take action and make sure that things are safe. They have ways of deploying patches and fixes immediately. They have ways of encrypting information. In fact, using Microsoft Azure, you can make sure that you're the only one who's able to read that data. You can have a key yourself and encrypt everything on the cloud so that only you have access to know what it is that this information contains. They also constantly monitor for and attempt to breach their own security so that they are more prepared if there's a malicious attack. So I hope that I've convinced you that there's some dramatic changes that have happened and that mobile devices and the cloud have offered really quite interesting features that potentially will help your business. But this is not actually the first time that something like this has been so dramatic. In fact, if we look back, we can see that technology over time becomes more and more abstract. We first worry about the hardware. Do we have something for our enterprise to build on top of? Then we build software, operating systems, applications. And only once we've moved down the stack of abstraction are we able to really create value for our business. And it actually, what I just described, this abstraction, is actually something that's happened over time. If we look early enterprise in the 70s, we're looking at mainframe computers. Now, mainframe computers took entire rooms, and if you were using a mainframe, you actually would have this terminal, this glowing green terminal connected to this mainframe, and you'd be able to type something, you'd send your request to the mainframe would do some computation and then send its response back. So it was basically just a glorified calculator. Now, when the PC came around in the 80s and 90s, it actually completely changed the paradigm. So when businesses who had mainframes replaced them with PCs, they couldn't just simply drop them in front of the people, and they couldn't take the applications they built for the mainframe and put them on PCs. It was actually quite different. It was so different, in fact, that I would go so far as to call it a revolution in computing. And then over the 80s, 90s, 2000s, PCs evolved and changed, improved. But here we are again now with mobile devices. And I would say that we're at another juncture where we have something that's quite revolutionary again. So let's take a quick look at each of these. Like I mentioned, the mainframe is very dumb, and basically all of the computing and the storage and everything like that happens on this massive room-sized computer. The programming languages that we used, we don't use a whole lot anymore: COBOL, Fortran, Pascal. So it was quite a different way of thinking. Then enter the PCs, what we've been using and what we probably still use in our businesses today. Now the PCs that we have in front of us on our desks are much more capable. They do a lot of the work, and the languages that we use to program for them are different as well. There's a lot of different concerns. Now here we are again. This is the third era of enterprise computing, and we have different ways of thinking again. We use different languages. We have different ways of designing these systems. The cloud is about interconnection. It's not just simply a repository of data. It's about actually creating an engaging experience with your users by sending push notifications. And your mobile device is actually extremely powerful, but it fits inside your pocket. So if we look back at enterprises who were making the adjustment between these mainframe computers and PCs, they weren't simply able to say, Susan, you've been using a mainframe computer. Here's your PC, and just watch her go. That did not happen because applications needed to be redesigned, she needed to be retrained, and the business needed to rethink their processes. So businesses who didn't make that adjustment simply didn't make it. So when I talk to businesses today about this next major adjustment for enterprises, I say, don't simply shrink your applications that you have today. You need to rethink what's possible. So what I mean by that is don't take your complicated asset management system and then just make it smaller and fit on a mobile device, because those buttons won't be clickable. Your users are going to find it very confusing to get around. Something that we've accepted on the PC land is not going to be quite as acceptable on mobile devices. Instead, rethink what's possible. So make something that's perfect for the platform. If we look at, for example, Facebook, they were on the mobile train fairly early, and they built a single app that basically replicated most of the features from their website. So they built something, even they used they used web technologies as well, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, to build their first mobile app. But what they realized, and what we have today, is Facebook actually has many apps that actually are much better at their tasks than a single monolithic app. And that's really important for our businesses as well. There's ways to unbundle our complicated systems that we use in our business today and have special apps that optimize the different things that we do. If I'm a field crew and I do vehicle inspections, I don't need access to the entire monolithic system that our business uses. All I need is a simple app that helps me do my one thing very, very easily. So if we look at the cloud, what sort of lessons can we pull out from the mainframe PC revolution? Well, I would say you can't simply just lift your applications that you have today. You actually need to shift your way of thinking to make the most of the cloud. So that means that your application that you have today, and this could be a .NET web application that you have today, you can just lift it into the cloud. That's technically possible. Azure will allow you to do that. But you actually can do a lot more, and that's really important. Like, what if your web application could actually notify all of your field staff that an inspection needs to be done in the field? Well, that's a shift in way of thinking. There's something new and exciting that we can do. So that's really important with the cloud. You have new ways of doing things. In fact, DevFacto has a mobile retreat, or we have a training that we do a couple times a year. So at this last one, we were actually focusing on Azure. What can Azure do for us? So we decided, well, let's create a simple app. And that app that we built was for scoring a golf game. So you could keep track of your score, you could view the standings, you could heckle other teams, which is very important, obviously. You could order beer. So there's a couple interesting features there. And now a normal sort of web-based way of thinking about it would be you simply log onto the portal and enter your score, refresh the page to see if anybody beats you. But we didn't think that was good enough. We wanted push notifications from the server so that every time something changed, your standing, you dropped a standing. Okay, well, it's time to drink more beer. So anytime that anything happened in this game, you'd be notified immediately. So anytime anybody messaged you as well, messaging and communication is very important. So we built that into this mobile platform. And the result is a better experience. So we took some of these lessons. We don't simply want to create an app that is disconnected and just keeps track of score. We actually want to create an engaging, immersive experience. And we did that, and the result is quite interesting. So now that we're in a mobile-first, cloud-first world, something interesting happens. We're able to focus on the users. Now, this is something that has happened over time. When we were building mainframe applications, we didn't worry so much about users. In the PC world, we started to think about it more. But today, we have mobile devices where people expect more. Our applications need to look beautiful. And this is the core of it, is that technology exists simply to serve users. Users are the most important parts of our businesses. The employees that we have are well trained, they're smart, they're really good at their jobs, they have a lot to offer. So technology needs to help them. They don't need to help technology, and that's really an important way of looking at it. If we look at how this has changed over time, this is based on how much time developers spend, right, and where they spend their time. In the 1970s, when we were building mainframe computers, we spent a lot of time worrying about hardware. We spent a lot of time with software. Around the PC era, we started to spend less time on those tasks and a little bit of time on user experience. Now that we have smartphones and tablets, today we're spending a fair amount of time focusing on making that experience the optimal. So that means streamlining tasks, making the apps look and feel really great. And I think that trend will continue into the future, that when we look back in 15 years, we're going to not have to worry about a lot of this technology because we're working off of some incredible abstractions. And instead, as developers, as business people, as IT departments, we can actually focus on making that user experience, on enabling people. If we look at this from a hierarchy of needs, like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for a business, for an IT department, we see that hardware is at the bottom. We worry about things like power, cooling, space, speed, all that type of stuff. Software, we have to make sure that we have secure applications, that we have an operating system that's fast and up to date. So we're worried about the software side of things. The very top of this is the users that I'm talking about, making sure that we're giving people the optimal user experience, helping them complete their tasks as quickly as possible, and being able to communicate within the organization. If we look at just a few numbers, I believe that by focusing on users, we're finally able to reduce the complexity of tasks in our business so that we can do things much faster than ever before. Think about replying to a message on your phone versus on your laptop. So if Laura, for example, emailed me and I pull my smartphone up and I can see that notification on my screen, on my mobile device. And all I have to do is swipe in that notification. I can actually reply in place and send that message back to her. And it could take me as little as 10 seconds. Yes, no, that's great, let's do that. Whereas if I had to do that via email, it would take time for me to open up the application, respond. So that task, for example, can be much, much improved. Going back to the vehicle inspection example where people need to complete a form, we can substantially reduce that simply by embracing a process like I was talking about, which really rethinks what's possible. So the person who's doing this vehicle inspection can walk around the truck in about 20 seconds, in less than a minute, and if there's no defects. Whereas completing this form, there's a ton of redundant information they have to fill in each time. Now think about an approval, for example, something that a lot of our businesses need, like a workflow. You need to approve or decline something. You can do that actually using just simple notifications. And that has substantial improvements because I don't have to stop what I'm focusing on in order to respond to something that needs my attention. if approvals are so easy that I don't have to think about it, it has substantial improvements in making myself and the people around me much more efficient. So let's take a look at what these interfaces are going to look like in the future, the way that DevFacto sees them. Well, first let's take a look back. So there's a lot of paper forms in our businesses, in our world in general, and they're complicated. They take a lot of time. They're confusing. They're prone to mistakes. So it's not a great experience. So when we started using computers, we said we can do better. So we built things like this, which was obviously designed by an engineer somewhere. And most of our applications actually look far better than this. This is maybe the worst case scenario. But the reality is that we haven't really thought about things differently enough by now to actually streamline entry of data. So one example that DevFacto has had is we built an asset transfer app for an oil company. And so we imagined that these field staff would be walking around with these tablets, and they have gloves on. It could be cold, it could be winter, and they're trying to find assets in order to transfer them. So something needs repair or service or whatever. They can just simply use this app, this portal, to do that task effortlessly. So you can see the interface looks relatively simple. If, for example, the field service person can go actually and scan an asset. So there's barcodes on these assets. They don't even need to enter any data. They don't need to enter an asset number. They can just scan it using their device or swipe with their finger once they find the device. So you can imagine that if you have gloves on, it's very difficult to tap tiny buttons. But a swipe is something that is very easy. So the column on the left there are all swipeable buttons. So someone with big fingers or on the go, they're walking around, they can easily initiate a transfer simply by swiping. And only once they've swiped is there additional follow-up questions, like where do you want that asset to go? So you can see that the interface is clean, it requires less training, and using it is actually a joy for people. There's other interesting things. I kind of alluded to this, but interactions on our devices with the newest version of Android and iOS 8, you can actually have interactive notifications. So that means that when I need to respond for approval or when I need to respond to a message with something else, I can actually do that in place without actually having to go to the app. And just think of the savings that would be. If you have a whole bunch of messages coming in and you're trying to get something done and somebody really needs your attention, all you do is swipe across. You're saying, yes, absolutely, I approve of that engineering drawing. Stop bothering me, I need to get back to work. But I've given them the ability to do their work. Another really interesting opportunity is voice control. So again, imagine a field services, an oil field services type application where an inspector has to walk along a pipeline, and they have to maybe see the pressure is not above the rating for the line itself. So they have to make sure that these gauges are all A-OK. Now it's cold again. Maybe it's winter. Maybe they're on a quad, and they just need to enter that information as quickly as possible. So they can do that simply by using voice recognition. Maybe the app knows where they are based on GPS, and they simply say, or maybe the app asks them, what's the pressure? Is the pressure less than 30 kPa? They say yes or no, and then the app says, well, what is the pressure? So there's ways to really optimize certain tasks by using voice control. So context is also really another important thing. That we at DevFacto have identified iBeacons or Bluetooth beacons as being a really powerful tool, because you just simply have these puck-sized devices, maybe at your entrance. Maybe the entrance to our office has one. So, or maybe for myself, I have one actually in my garage at home. So when I come home on my bike, I can actually pull out my phone, look at the screen, it'll say welcome home, because it recognizes it's in range of this beacon. And I can say, and it can say to me, do you want to open the garage door, Stephen? I can say yes or no right there. And so it understands my context. It understands what I'm trying to do by using beacons, or I can use location services or something else. So context is really, really important. Another important thing to consider is that motions really, in the interfaces of the future, we actually see an opportunity to make things more beautiful and engaging. And this is especially apparent. We're looking here at Android L, or Lollipop's new material design. And it looks and feels really great. It's an engaging experience. It provides a sense of motion and excitement. And we really feel that in order for businesses to have buy-in from their employees, we need to create applications that are beautiful and fun, lively, engaging. So in all of this, I want to emphasize the fact that every once in a while, technology changes enough that it's not simply an evolution, it's actually a revolution. So today, mobility and the cloud have converged together to create a revolution. And in order to fully utilize it, we need to understand what it can do. So when in our businesses, when I see businesses that use mobile and try to envision how they can leverage the platform and how they can leverage the cloud, I see that they are creating competitive advantages for their business. They're empowering their users, and that's a really, really important thing for our businesses. As in our businesses, we're trying to innovate, create exciting new ways to do things. Mobility in the cloud are one really, really powerful way. So I went over a lot of things at a high level, and I understand that you may have the feeling like this is vague. I didn't really go into a lot of the technical details of using the cloud, for example, or using mobility. But that was intentional, because I think it's important to understand the philosophy of what sort of world we're living in, technically speaking. But I do want to give you a few tips in your businesses to start deploying this practically. So there's four maybe key ways that you can get started. So imagine your business has a new business case. An example is one we worked with recently is someone who is a business who is replacing some paper-based forms. Many businesses have this. So this business just decided, well, which one is the most painful today? We can just start to move that one to make that one for a mobile device and use the cloud. So they're creating a simple business case. The scope is very clear, and the business value is very clear. They can create a clear ROI from that, and start to create proof that mobile in the cloud is really powerful. A second way is maybe your infrastructure is starting to feel creaky. For example, someone we've worked with recently, their servers were filling up with emails, just chock full of emails. And so we said to them, we can just move to Azure and fix that issue once and for all, instead of just throwing another server at the problem. And this is important because Gartner says that 92% of the cost of a software solution is maintenance. So a lot of businesses are incentivized to move to the cloud, or actually resolve the actual issue. The cloud is infinitely scalable. Maybe in the past, your business has had disappointing results. Maybe it was even a mobile app and people didn't use it, they didn't like it. Well, that's, I think, symptomatic of the fact that a lot of businesses don't think mobile first, cloud first. In one of our with one of our clients recently, another vendor had built a mobile app, and it took 10 minutes to download all the data. And we looked at why that was. Was it just performance on the mobile device? No, it was actually because they didn't use a cloud architecture. And because of that, they were spewing tons of data, which had way too much volume when considering a mobile device. It was fine for other devices. When your business has disappointing results, oftentimes an easy way to turn that around is by reframing your way of looking at the problem. And I would say that the best way to do that is pursuing a mobile first, cloud first strategy. The fourth way that you can get started is to simply recognize that this is an important enough issue that it can drive significant change in your business. And you might consider this as a proactive approach. And this is really, again, about creating a competitive advantage. So if you can see the value in these two tools, cloud and mobile devices, you should probably get started. Try to find ways that your business can unlock the potential. Specifically, DevFacto has we offer a whole suite of consulting offerings, but one that's of particular interest for businesses who are starting on this mobile cloud journey is an ideation workshop. And the ideation workshop helps us identify opportunity in the business. It helps us empathize with the users and the business to understand what the real issues are. We can then spark ideas. We're creating a volume of ideas and then iterating until we come up with something that's really great. And the last step is build a plan. We say, how can we actually move forward on this? And so if you're interested in pursuing this, I'll have my email on this next slide. You can contact us and we'd be happy to set you up.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen. We have a few minutes left here for some questions. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screens. We'll just give a few minutes to see if any questions pop up here. No hands or anything. Okay. Well, if anybody has any other questions later on, you can definitely reach out and get in touch with us. So thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions or you want to discuss how you can implement cloud or mobile into your organization, we'd be more than happy to chat with you. So please get in touch with us at defacto.com, or you can reach out to Stephen directly at his contact information that's on your screen right now. Thank you very much, Stephen, for your presentation today. I hope everyone really enjoyed it. And be sure to keep your eyes peeled for more upcoming events and webinars. They'll be posted as well